Hello and welcome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in here to Alley Talk, the debut episode of the Philly Sports Network Phillies Team Podcast. I'm Matt Watson, joined alongside Tommy Orm. Tommy, how we doing tonight?
Good. Excited to be here. Excited to start talking Phillies again as we inch ever closer to the start of spring training. But can't wait.
We are almost there, but yeah, it's about time that PSN finally had a dedicated Philly show, and I feel like this is the perfect time to start that. But so the idea behind this podcast, it's not like a traditional podcast. So it's the entire Phillies team here at PSN that is going to be contributing to these weekly. So the idea is, it might be a different combination every week, but the goal is to bring you the latest and newest with the Philadelphia Phillies, as well as shout out our other great shows we have on here. Flipping the bird with the Eagles, the Outside Insider with Liam, and of course, Trending in the AM with Phil in the morning. So just another addition to that show's lineup. But yeah, kind of to kick things off, it's been quite a quiet off season for the Phillies, and by the title of this stream tonight is "Wake Up Phillies," as the team really hasn't done much so far. So, Tommy, I'll start with you here with this. Like, what are your overall thoughts on the Phillies off season and kind of lack thereof?
Yeah. So I will answer you. I want to say two, just in terms of launching this whole endeavor. There's not there's not enough MLB baseball love on the internet anyway. I understand why, but this is one of the best Phillies eras that we're living through since the late 2000s. So there should be enough interest out there and enough going on with this team, quiet off season or not, that we got to keep them coming back for more.
I agree.
In terms of their quiet off season, obviously the big piece was Aaron Nola getting that deal done. Um, but otherwise, it's been relatively quiet in terms of signings, acquisitions. So a couple of minor league guys here. I know we got the release today of their spring training invitees, which is exciting. We've been going back and forth on that too. Light list.
Very
Um, Alec would be remiss if we didn't bring up the fact there were no left-handed arms. Um, so definitely interesting and interesting to see Scott Kingery on there again too. But in terms of the way this roster is currently constructed, I'm not surprised it's been this quiet. Um, and we can dive into some of those reasons later, including payroll. But it's you got Nola locked down. You got Wheeler. Wheeler's extension is going to be right around the corner. So at this point, in terms of being a big player, it doesn't make a lot of sense with a roster you already know is maybe a couple utility bats away, or maybe an arm in the bullpen from competing again for a World Series.
Yeah, I mean, locking down Nola, I think, was important. I was of the opinion that they should bring him back. I know that was a very debated topic, kind of kicking off free agency, and the Phillies did not waste a lot of time with bringing Nola back. I mean, he was basically the first move of the MLB offseason, which
Hmm.
I thought was, it's typical for the Phillies to be active early, especially under Dave Dombrowski. But bringing Nola back, guaranteeing you're kind of bringing back the starting rotation that was very successful last year, the best WAR among all starting rotations in Major League Baseball last season. So bringing back Nola was key, and I was very excited about that. And I'm very excited about the idea of extending Zach Wheeler. But that's been it. I mean, you mentioned some of the minor league moves. Stuff like that. But nothing that's necessarily an impactful move. And I agree from the sense that this lineup and the rotation and even the bullpen for that matter is kind of set for the most part. Like there might be a couple spots that are up for debate, like maybe like the fifth starter or one of the rotation spots or a bench, a guy off the bench kind of thing. So like there's a lot of like we said, a lot of spots locked up, but I think that shouldn't necessarily take away from their aggressiveness in the offseason.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, just because, like I told you before this, I did a deep dive on this payroll stuff. They're technically speaking, in terms of just active rosters, the only Yankees are spending more money. Um, the Mets technically are spending the second most because they have almost $50 million in dead money between Scherzer, Verlander, and Jimmy McCann. Um, but otherwise, the Phillies are probably about they're about $25 million away from matching the Yankees on their yearly payroll, and which is what something like a top end starter like a Blake Snell would cost. And not to say they wouldn't go out and do something like that, but this Phillies team matching the Yankees payroll seems uncharacteristic. I don't know how you feel about that, but it's new to me. Uh,
Yeah, it's different for the Phillies, right? Like I mean for so long they just did not spend money. And I mean even the '07 to 11 run, they made trades and they had a lot of homegrown talent, but they didn't really go out and sign like the big guy, you know? I
mhm.
mean, they re-signed well, I say re-signed, but they signed Cliff Lee that second time around. But you know, they originally traded for Lee. They traded for Halliday, you know. They traded for Roy Oswalt, Joe Blanton. Like some of these guys, you know, was via the trade. It wasn't going out and
Yeah,
splashing with big money. So I mean, Scott Rowland was inducted to the Wall of Fame this year, and you know, infamously, one of the reasons why he wanted to leave Philadelphia in the first place was because the team didn't spend money and didn't seem committed to winning. So I think under John Middleton's ownership, he has proven, you know, the whole stupid money quote, but he's proven that he'll throw money out there if it brings success and winning. And I think that has come to fruition these last two seasons.
yeah, for sure. I mean, how realistic do you think at this point is a Blake Snell, is a Clayton Kershaw? Um, I don't know. Like even Jordan Montgomery at this point is probably you're probably looking at 20 mil a year, I would
Mhm.
imagine.
Yeah,
Like I understand that Taiwan Walker's not exactly that Taiwan Walker contract looks even worse now.
it does.
Which was, let's see here in my notes, 4 years, 72 million. I think I got.
Yeah, I think it was like
Yeah,
roughly 17 a year.
yeah. That's a lot of money for a guy who that contract is going to be expiring as he turns 33 years old. Now, a Taiwan Walker 33 feels a little different than a Zach Wheeler 33. But you have that albatross there of I think a move last season that a lot of people defended because that was the going rate for a pitcher like Walker. And now you're looking at 3 years left after that inaugural year. And I think like what do you do with him if you want to bring somebody in, even if it is more of a mid, I say mid, but a Jordan Montgomery kind of guy, not a Blake Snell. It's just
Right.
it's so much money.
It is a lot. You'd have to realistically, you'd probably have to find a trade partner
Yeah.
who'd be willing to take on some like the Phillies are gonna have to eat a chunk of it. But like if he's making 17, you know, in AAV, if you're the Phillies are paying 7 and sending a middle tier prospect to a team who needs a starter, basically to clear that cap, you save 10. If you signed a Snell or a Montgomery, now you're only in theory paying an extra 10 or 15 million a year. So it's not the craziest, and I mean, let's be honest, the Phillies can afford it. So it's
Yeah.
not like it's not like they're, you know, penny pinching or anything. But I honestly wouldn't I would you had said what are the chances you think we get one of those guys? I'd say maybe 5-10%. I don't
Yeah.
think we're in that big market for any player at this point. I think the Yoshito Yamamoto sweepstakes was a little different because I think the
Mhm.
Phillies saw he was like, you know, a gem and they were willing to pay that money. But in terms of some of these other guys, I don't expect them to really be spending that kind of money.
Yeah. I mean, you have to figure at this point that Snell is probably around what 25 mil a year, like somewhere around where Nola fell. Which again, like it, not something they couldn't afford. I'm just not used to talking about the Phillies as if they were the New York Yankees. You know, it's like a different like there's a weird mix here of almost less homegrown talent than maybe not those later 2000 teams, but like the Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley's, Ryan Howard's, those were the cornerstones of an organization with the Cole Hamels, where you could just bring in a couple of guys. You look around this team between like Castellanos, March, uh, Harper, Turner, Schwarber, all of these guys grew up somewhere else.
Right.
Um, and but just between Harper, Turner, and now Nola alone, that's $80 million a year. Um, And then if you want to throw Castellanos and Schwarber in there, there's another 40 million. It's like they're crazy numbers. So at some point you got to like Micah Bell, is he Griff McGarry? Are these guys going to be coming into the picture at some point next year where you can say to yourself, okay, Taijuan Walker, he can be the long man. Now we got this young kid that can come in and pitch for us, and
Mhm.
you don't have to go out and spend money or prospects to bring them in.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, how the core of this team has been grown elsewhere, and we've paid whatever the price it was to acquire them. But I do think that the Phillies have set themselves up well, especially since they've had Brian Barber take over the amateur scouting and drafting and stuff like that. Like, Stott is homegrown, Bohm is homegrown, Nola
Mm-hmm.
is technically homegrown, even though he's kind of in like a different stage of his career at this point. I know Andrew Painter is out with the injury and he's not going to perform this year, but I just think they have some of these pieces that, like, you could say in a couple of years, all right, well, when Schwarber walks or when Castellanos walks, all right, now you're seeing some of these homegrown guys come into their own. Like, if they can hit on a Painter or an Abel or a McGarry in the rotation to go with
Yeah,
the rest of Nola and Wheeler's deal, like stuff like that, they have the guys, in my opinion, who are gonna be able to come up and fill some of those slots. So some of that money's gonna come off the books, which is nice. But they have to keep hitting on these draft picks because at the end of the day, yes, you can go out and spend all this money like the Yankees did to win whatever, the 28 championships or whatever. But the best teams, the Astros, the '07 to 11 Phillies, they were homegrown, and that's the most sustainable way for success. So why I am very happy with the way these last couple of years have played out. I don't want us to get used to just spending all this money. As cool as it is as a fan,
yeah,
I would like to see those homegrown talents kind of take over.
yeah. Well, it's the same thing as drafting a quarterback in the first round, and then you've got 5 years where you can start paying these other pieces. It'd just be nice at this point where you have guys like Stott and Baum. I don't know exactly what their contract arbitration status is, but I imagine those guys are going to get paid at some point over the next couple of years.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the quicker we can get some of these young guys up, especially the arms. Not to say that, like, I still think the Phillies, from a starting pitching and bullpen perspective, like, things could be much, much worse.
Oh, of course.
Um, it's just we're kind of playing with our food a little bit. Like this is a 5-star steak meal, and we're picking it to pieces because there's been no activity over the last couple of months.
No, yeah, we're waiting for another drink, so we're sitting there looking at the steak, like, well, this could be a little bit better. Trending in the AM, Phil, thanks for hopping on another one of our fantastic shows here on Philly Sports Network. He said, "What's
Cool,
the biggest
Philip.
weakness at this point for the Phillies?" In my opinion, I would say probably the bench would
Yeah,
be my weak point. And that's very much nitpicking, but the lineup's strong, the rotation's strong, the bullpen's strong. Obviously, they can improve. Every team can improve in those areas, but I think the bench personally was exposed in the playoffs. You saw how there really wasn't a diverse bench. Like, there wasn't guys that you could kind of put in to fulfill a role. There was no Matt Stairs where he was coming off the bench to try and crank a home run. Like, the guys on the bench, you were kind of hoping didn't have to step into the game. I mean, Jake Cave ended up taking the last at bat for the
right.
Phillies in Game 7. There was no reason for that. Like, Jake Cave is not on most playoff teams' benches, let alone on playoff team rosters. So I think if the Phillies could add a bench bat, that would probably fulfill one of their bigger weaknesses, in my opinion.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you there. For me, and I don't know if it's totally a weakness, but they got to figure out what they're doing in center field because it'll ultimately affect. It's all the way around the diamond. Is Harper coming back and playing first? If we say yes there, then where's Schwarber? He's the DH. Okay. Is Brandon Marsh the left fielder? That means Johan Rojas is in center. Like, what is going on in center? Do we trust, after what we saw from Rojas this past postseason, that he can be somebody that sustains a full 162 game season as a competent offensive player? I like there's been talks already about him starting the year in AAA. If he starts the year in AAA, then what do we what does the outfield look like? does Harper go back out to the outfield, and Castellanos shifts back over to left, and then Marsh is in center. And then where's our first baseman? Do we bring Hoskins back on a 1-year deal if we wait him out long enough? There's so many of these defensive positioning like questions
Mhm.
all need to be answered by whether or not Johan Rojas is ready to be an everyday center fielder. If he's not, they need to do something about it now. So just in terms of a weakness, it's more of a question mark, I guess, but that would be what would keep me up at night with a position that's that important, because I don't need to see Schwarber in the outfield again. Like I'm all
No.
set. He's a great DH.
Well, I'm with
Um,
you from the sense that they need to identify what they're going to do. And it might end up being a spring training thing where they assess
yeah.
how Rojas is hitting. But I don't know. For me, I would let him. I would just give him the first couple months of the season and see how he's performing offensively, because he hit 300 in the regular season, and
Mhm.
he's not a 300 hitter. And I was
Yeah.
honestly shocked that he hit that highly. And it was due to his speed, realistically. But then in the playoffs, he didn't like get. He had like maybe 2 hits and like 40 at bats. I
Mhm.
don't think he's that guy either. I think he's somewhere in the middle. I think he's probably a 250 hitter in the big leagues. Not going to hit for a lot of home runs, but he's going to have a lot of doubles, a good amount of triples. He'll walk, get steal bases. Like, and at the end of the day, he's going to be your 9 hitter regardless. So I appreciate his elite glove in the outfield more so
Mhm.
than what he's going to contribute offensively. And I think people ride on him because they saw how he kind of went out at the end with, but the whole lineup got cold, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be on Johan Rojas to have to, be that spark plug kind of thing. He's the ninth guy on in the lineup for a reason, and obviously that doesn't abstain him from performing in clutch moments. But I don't know. The kid came up, played 40 games in the bigs before the playoffs. I understand, some frustrations, and it looked like he got figured out a little bit, but
Yeah.
I would let him ride at the beginning of the year. If things still aren't clicking, you can send him down, and you could very easily find somebody to go out and play left field from another team, or however they decide. But I would rather not, because if you do sign somebody, now you're kind of locked into that for the year, and you have to move people around. And I kind of just want to see the team let their young players grow a little bit.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I guess if we are talking about question marks again, like we saw a couple of slow starts last year from Turner, from Schwarber. I mean, Schwarber, it's just an annual thing, but it would just be like we're bringing back essentially the same roster, and it's year two of that, really year three of like the general construct of this team that can go deep in the playoffs. It would just be a cool drink of water to see these guys come out and not struggle immediately. Like it's okay for Schwarber to finish the year batting 250.
Mhm.
That's that kind of stuff. I guess the streakiness worries me, but um, again, you can't fix all this stuff. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Schwarber is who he is at this point, and we kind of just have to accept it. He's not going to hit a ball until June, but
yeah.
then he's going to hit a million of them. So I know from that standpoint, I get it. I think you made a good point about the slow starts, and something that interests me this year is to see how they approach spring training, because I know last year was a little different with the World Baseball Classic not having a good amount of
Mm,
guys, but it's been 2 straight years of really rough starts to where they had to dig themselves out of a hole
yeah.
halfway through the year. And while it's worked out for them, you just can't keep doing that every year, because eventually you're not gonna dig yourself out of it. So first year was under Girardi, last year was under Thompson. I wonder his second, spring training, if Rob Thompson is going to change anything, take a different approach, because like I said, the team cannot afford to start slow. And kind of one of the questions that I had tonight was if the Phillies can win the National League East this year. It's been the Braves division for
Mhm.
I mean for a while at this point. The Phillies have not won it since 2011. And despite making the playoffs last 2 years, making the World Series 2 years ago, I would like to win the division. Like that's not, it's not nothing, right? And so the only way that they can win the division is if they start strong. They don't even have to start hot necessarily, but you have to be at least 500. Like you can't
Yeah,
be 6, 7 games under 500. So do you think they can win the National League East this year?
I do. I actually think a wild card berth this year is a failure. Um, they're spending, I believe, almost. The Braves are the fourth most expensive roster in baseball, but the Phillies have invested so much in this team for them not to over this stretch of the young Braves to win some NL East crowns at some point. Like, it will be considered a failure. It's nice that they're getting into the playoffs and they're finding ways to overcome, but it would be great not to have to watch another three game wild card series and sweat that out. Like, let's just take care of business. And like you said, all you really need to do is start the season like 500 through 40 games, and you're on pace to do better than you've done the past 2 years.
Hmm.
So, um, hopefully this is the year. I do still think, like, whether it's somebody like Hader, like an elite closer that they can go out and get, or even like I threw Reese Hoskins out there just because I would love for that to happen. The way his season ended was just like heartbreaking, honestly, for that to be the way he ends things in Philly.
Hmm.
But if they wanted to bring him back on a 1 year deal, um, I mean, I would be thrilled with something like that. But there's other guys out there, like to your point about Jake Cave. What if we replace Jake Cave with Trey Mancini? Like,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
seems normal. Joey Votto, like
Oh,
Joey Votto's
I would
out
love
there.
that.
Why not? Like,
Hmm.
just again, this is somebody that just can come off the bench and give you a professional at bat. Um, just like little tweaks like that, I think are going to make a big difference. And this is stuff that we can talk about in 3 or 4 months when I'm sure they're going to wait to do it until then.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Just some thoughts there.
No, yeah, like so last year, right? Hoskins goes down, and immediately everybody's like, okay, well, Derek Hall is gonna be our first baseman,
Oh
and
God.
let's see what Derek Hall can do. And then about a week into the season, Hall goes down for a few months at a time. So now Bohm is playing first practically every other day. So Sosa's getting a lot of playing time. Cody Clemens was getting a lot of play time, which I thought Cody Clemens was pretty good last year for for what I expected out of it, but. I would much rather have, like you said, a Trey Mancini or a Joey Votto than a Cody Clemens, than a Jake Cave off the bench. Like a guy like if let's say Joey Votto signs with the Phillies as the lefty bench bat, he'll play first base when Harper needs a day or Harper's DHing or whatever. If Joey Votto is in the lineup batting eighth for this team, I feel completely confident versus if I'm checking the lineup, it's like, oh, okay, Cody Clemens is playing today. If he gets a hit, that'd be really awesome. With Votto,
Right.
I'd expect him to get a hit. I'd expect him to have 10, 12 home runs, in spot starts. You're coming off the bench and, providing that veteran leadership. Because when you're a bench guy, you have to do more than just what you're doing on the field because you're not on the field all the time. Look at Garrett Stubbs. He's the team hype man.
Yeah.
Everybody loves him, even though he plays maybe 25 games a year, right? So you have to find guys who can not only fit in with the clubhouse but have that extra it factor to them, and this bench doesn't have it right now. And I think you kind of talk about how they still have money to spend and to use. I'd rather not wait till later. I would rather have a guy like that solidified heading into spring training where you could say, okay, this guy's going to make the roster, he's going to start 40 games for us this year, and he's going to fill his role.
Yeah. Well, I also, just before we chatted, I had to do like a refresh because obviously I know the NOLA thing happened, and I've been following free agency casually enough, but I'm like, they must have done something. Like, there must have been something I missed. And no, they haven't. Like, Rich Hill. Like, no, let's sign Rich Hill. Why not? Like, just something. And I'm looking through the transactions. I'm like, there must be something wrong here. There has been absolutely no activity. Um, it's just, there are still a lot of. My fear is this all happens at the deadline. And I only say fear because we're just not going to have anything to talk about until opening day. But there are still some names out there that could make a lot of sense just from a depth perspective. I,
Hmm.
I, I got a full list of them. James Paxton, uh, you know, why not bring Lorenzen back on a 1 year deal? Like, I don't know, like Alex Wood. There are just a couple of B tier guys that you could bring in that aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg, but will at least give the roster a little bit of a mix up
Hmm.
and some more options,
No, I
frankly.
agree. Yeah, like there's enough talent that's still out there and it's relatively cheap to where you don't have to have the league minimum 30-year-old career minor leaguer coming off the
Yeah.
bench. Like Weston
No.
Wilson was a great story last year. Hit 30 home runs in the minors. You know, first his first career at bat, he goes deep. Awesome moment. That stuff is really cool. But I don't want to have to rely on a Weston Wilson type player for a championship caliber team. Weston Wilson would have been even better for like the 2016, 17, 18 fills, where he could have, we could have bought ourselves into that. Like, wow, Weston might be our left fielder, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for a team with championship aspirations, you have to have something more. And I think, like, you're right. Some of those names that you're throwing out there are they're cheap. You know what you're getting out of them. It's not like it's a surprise or a potential thing you're grabbing for. You know what an Alex Wood's going to bring you or what a James Paxton's going to bring you. One name I wanted to throw out there. He might be a little more expensive than those guys we had just mentioned, but it's kind of something that's right up Dave Dombrowski's alley. It's Liam Hendricks, former
Mm.
closer of the White Sox. Basically missed all last year. He was battling cancer. He's healthy. He's ready to go. He's having this full off season to kind of get back. Dombrowski loves signing former closers to 1-year deals for like $10 million on a prove it situation.
Yeah.
We saw it with Kimbrel last year. Jerry's Familia the year before that with Corey Knebel. What are your thoughts on potentially maybe bringing a guy like Liam Hendricks, who a couple of years ago was like the best closer in baseball?
Yeah, no, that's the kind of move that makes a lot of sense right now because you've got Alvarado in the bullpen like that between him and Sir Anthony. That's probably your mix there. But it'd be nice to have some guy that came in that had been an established closer that knows the role. It felt a lot like a jigsaw puzzle last year, and it was just who's hot right now. And ultimately, Kimbrel took it. But early in the year, it was just like, oh god, like who are we getting out of the bullpen right now? Like who's going to blow a save tonight? It'd just be nice to kind of understand beforehand who your guy is coming in, so that those other guys can get a little more comfortable in their roles. But I like Hendricks. That'd be an interesting one.
I think he would fit in Philly great. Just baseball aside, I think his personality would be great. And like kind of just along that like line of thinking, Craig Kimbrell was brought in last year to be the fourth option in the pen, right?
Yeah,
It was supposed to be Alvarado, Dominguez. I think Gregory Soto was supposed to have more of a role than Kimbrell. And I think Kimbrell was, I think for what we got out of him, especially in the regular season, was more than what we were anticipating. And I think he had a great year. I know the playoffs kind of ruined his reputation and his image in the city, but a guy like that was only supposed to be the fourth best option, and
yeah,
for a long stretch he had to be the guy. And I just think that if something like that happens again, where Alvarado misses time this year, you can't really trust Dominguez like you once could. I don't
mm,
think Soto necessarily would be able to fulfill that role. So you don't have that, you know, Craig Kimbrell type pitcher right now in your depth that can maybe step up for you for a month or two at a time. And I think a guy like Liam Hendricks could do that. I think Liam Hendricks could come in and be the closer right away.
yeah,
But, you know, Alvarado is probably the most feared lefty in baseball, other than maybe Hader at this point. So I'm comfortable with Jose being the closer, but it would just be nice to have good depth. And I know you can't have an old, I can't. Your depth can't be old and expensive either. You have to have some young guys, but I just think we're leaning too heavily right now on young cheap arms versus
mm.
some veterans with experience.
Yeah. There were some names in this bullpen I was reading this morning. I'm like, okay, I guess you're the guy. Thank God though that Kimbrel was as good as he was last year because Soto was a train wreck.
Mhm.
So like you have to plan for one or two train wrecks in the bullpen every year. This can't be the final look at what this 2024, which oh god, weird saying 2024,
Mhm.
um, Phillies bullpen's going to look like. And to your point, they're just like there's so many options. Like your Josh Haders and your Hector Neris's are going to be more expensive, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm pretty sure it seems like they're pretty solid indications they're going to end up as Yankees. Um,
I saw earlier today Haters heating up with Houston. So
oh well,
I think Neris will end up a Yankee, and because the Astros are losing Neris, they're now turning to Hater.
fair
That's
enough.
just my thoughts.
No, they're basically the Yankees of the South. But like, how do you feel about? little reunion with David Robertson or speaking of left-handed arms, Jake Diekman, 38-year-old Jake Diekman.
I would pass on Robertson
Yeah,
just because of what I saw with the Marlins last year. Even though he had a good start with the Mets,
yeah,
I would not mind Diekman. I know he's kind of bounced around a little bit and pitching. He was pitching in Oakland for a while, and
yeah.
that's enough to ruin anybody's spirits. So I think him fulfilling that role, like we were said, I would not mind it. And if he could still whip that thing, I am fully in on Jake Diekman.
I frankly like that's a real throwback. He's a like pits of hell Phillies Philly, you know.
Yeah, he was in the
Um,
Hamels trade.
yeah,
You know?
that's like those like the Freddie Galvis teams, and oh god, who I do love Freddie Galvis, but I understand why he's not around anymore.
Yeah, I feel you there. So like I have the bullpen up right now as it
Yeah,
stands, right? You have Alvarado, that's a lock. Jeff Hoffman, a great addition last year.
yeah,
Um, but like we were saying, you can't always trust the same guys year in and year out. There's always gonna be a guy or two who lets you down. Soto, Dominguez, like we talked about, Matt Strom, who I thought played a good role last year.
mhm.
Um,
He did.
but then like that, this is where it starts to like dip off. Ryan Kirkering. Kirkering
Yeah,
could be the closer by mid July and be dominant, or he could be pitching in AAA. Like
right.
it really all depends. Then you have Andrew Bellotti, who bounced between the majors and AAA last year. Like Fangraphs says Dylan Covey. I thought he was a free agent, but maybe not.
It
So like
looks like they had signed him back on a minor league deal, but
okay,
I might be wrong about that. I'm getting all my contracts mixed up.
like Nick Nelson is an option. Um,
Oh no, he's not.
yeah, no, seriously, like Junior Marte, I like um Connor Brogdon, like some of those guys where, yeah, they might have a couple outings in them, but I just don't want to have to rely on them.
I know it's tough. It's tough, man. Uh, and Strom's a free agent after this season. Uh, it's hard when you're looking at this. Um, I thought this is interesting too. This has nothing to do with the bullpen, but I had to like looking through all this deferred money stuff.
Hmm.
We're still paying Didi Gregorius.
Really?
Yeah, he deferred 500K.
I mean, I smart, I guess. You got some steady money coming, but that's pretty funny.
That's awesome. So him and Scott Kingery are dead cat, but like Kingery, is there a shot for him?
Oh my god. It's funny because heading into spring training last year, I wrote about let's give Kingery a full go here.
Yeah.
Because at that time I thought that was it with him because I knew they were going to decline the option at the end of the year. I did not realize by doing so they could kind of claim him back on the minor league contract he
Hmm.
was originally on, which is a weird twist of events there. But I think that is cooked. I don't think I'm honestly shocked that they didn't just outright release him and let him try somewhere else. I don't think Scott Kingery is part of their plans moving forward.
No, probably not. He can play a couple of positions. Yeah, you have to think his confidence might be a little cooked at this point. After everything he's gone through, but he did make some money.
Yes, he did.
It could be a lot worse.
Yeah, they paid him what, like $20 million to just not play,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
That's a great deal.
yeah. I'll take that. I'll take $20 million
Any day,
dollars not to do anything.
any day. Yeah, I
Always looking
mean,
for 20 mil.
Kingery kind of represents like that last bad Philly stretch,
Yeah,
like the 17, 18, like right before they started to finally pick things up, and then moving on from Kapler. Like Kingery's kind of like if Kingery were to let go, it's almost like the end of that era, which
yeah.
is a good thing in my opinion.
Dylan Cousins.
Oh
Who
my
else was
gosh.
on that? A Double. Like that was just.
You
Ugh.
had Aaron Altair, the KBO legend.
I love
You know,
him. I would love to see him make a comeback. Which, yeah, like he's had some good years in the KBL, has he not?
yeah, I know he's been hitting for power over there.
Yeah, dude. Bring him back to the states.
Like how Darren Ruff made a resurgence with the Giants a couple years ago.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Darren Ruff is actually he's another guy that's out there right now. Like, I mean, I think he had like a 0.1 WAR, but
It's all right.
he's floating around. Someone's gonna sign him, and he's gonna be a bat for. He'll look great in a Miami Marlins jersey or something,
Yeah, or the Oakland A's, somebody like that. Yeah, you're
Right.
right. I mean, I'm just kind of scrolling through some. Like, there's still a lot of major league caliber talent that is floating around, and like, there's probably a good 50 players that will probably get signed between now and start of spring training. I would say, um, and the Phillies should be in on some of these guys. Like,
Yeah.
uh, a wild one, right? We don't need a shortstop, but Brandon Crawford. Probably a bench guy at this point, but I guarantee you could put him in late at second, third, or short, right? I mean, Trey Turner, I know he's a $300 million shortstop, but I don't necessarily trust his glove. You could put Crawford in the ninth inning as a defensive sub,
Yeah.
and I'd feel great about that, despite him being 30, 37 years old. Like, there's so much experience and talent out there. You don't have to break the bank, but go get some experience. Go get some of these guys. Look what Evan Longoria did for the Diamondbacks last year. Go
Yeah.
get a guy like that. That's exactly what we need.
Hurt us. Well, it's like all the teams talk to, and they're like, let's not sign anyone. Because you're at the point now where some of these, even some of the higher end talent, like are gonna be relegated to shorter deals. Um, so if you just wait around a little bit longer, like at the beginning of this offseason, the Reese Hoskins thing, to go back to that, I didn't imagine a world where Hoskins would come back to Philly because I figured he'd be looking for something multi-year. At this point in the offseason, is that multi-year contract coming for Hoskins, who sat out all of last year? I don't know. So
I
he
doubt
might,
it.
at this point, he might be on a 1 year prove it deal. Come on home, boy. I don't know.
I just don't know where he fits.
I
Like,
know.
I don't want to see Schwarber in left field. I don't think Schwarber wants to see himself in left field. And like, it's just at the end of the, if Reese played, like, if the whole Reese in left field thing worked out when they tried that back in like 2018, if that
Mm,
had worked, yeah, maybe kind of
yeah.
thing. But he's a guy without a position in a sense. It's a shame that he doesn't play center field, right? Like,
Right.
because that answers a lot of questions for us. But
I think it
unfortunately,
does push.
it,
It pushes out either Marsh or Rojas,
right.
frankly, because then you start moving around the diamond with everybody and put putting Harper back in the outfield.
Yeah, and I don't want to see that. I don't think the team wants to see that. I think he can age gracefully at first base, and he'll hit till he's 43
Yeah.
and hit 500 home runs hopefully, and retire a Hall of Famer. But Reese's like I met Reese at his charity event last year. Such a nice guy. Like,
Yeah.
could not have been a nicer person. And it kills me inside because it's like, wow, like this is a homegrown Phil. He was here in the rough times. He's been here for the great times. I mean, his playoff run in 2022 will never be forgotten in this town. But there's just not a spot, unfortunately. And you know, if Alec were here, Alec is so pro Reese Hoskins, and it's just a shame, but it's just kind of how things have played out.
I know it's a bummer because he is kind of like that old guard at this
Mhm.
point, which is funny to say for somebody who's
Yeah,
not even 30. Um, but yeah, I know you're right. I know that you're right, but it would still be a nice little reunion. Are you planning on getting out to a lot of games this year?
that is the goal.
Yeah.
Hoping to have so Liam and I are cooking on that front. So
Okay.
everybody stay tuned to Philly Sports Network's Twitter page. We are trying to cook on that front to try and bring game coverage to our network. But yeah, I'm hoping 2024 is not only a great year for the Phillies, but for us as well as the Phillies team. Because I think last year we took a lot of steps in the right direction, and I think this year is gonna be even better. So teasing that one a little bit.
God, yeah, that's we got to break down that gate, get
Hmm.
into those games. I'm at the point now where I'm desperate enough to see the Phillies. I was considering some like partial national season tickets just to they'll sell you like the Thursday through Sunday package. It's not that bad, especially for the Nats right now with with how good that club is. It's pretty
Yeah.
cheap.
Oh,
So,
I can imagine. Yeah, you probably get it's what, 6, 7 games that they come down there for. You probably get all 7 of them for a
oh yeah.
couple $100 probably.
Well, I'll tell
Probably
you,
good seats too.
I'll be at a Nats game, hopefully a Nats Phillies game later this season. I lost I came in last place in my high school fantasy football group.
Nice.
And the challenge, I don't know how creative this is. I haven't seen it online, but I'm sure it's out there. Is in a 9 inning game to eat 9 hot dogs and drink 9 beers. So basically, a hot dog and a beer per inning. So, I mean, I'll either end up in the hospital or jail. Um,
Philly
but
Sport Philly Sports
that's
Network for you.
yeah, I'll give you. I'll be giving everyone live updates on that. Dreading that one.
Nice. Well, ironically enough, I'm trying to come down to DC for a Phillies Nats game, so I think Kylie's down in the DC area too, and Regina's down there as well. So we
Yeah,
have we have a lot of presence down there. So maybe we could do a little group meetup or something down in DC. Which I
yeah.
think that'd be cool.
The DC office. That
Yeah.
Nats Park is great too. I'll tell you, it's the same architect as who built Citizens Bank Park, so it's very similar in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Um, and I love going there. It's just that area has changed a lot over, I guess, from the time I was in high school until now. It's so built up now. It's just there's restaurants everywhere. It it's a cool atmosphere. So for anyone listening, if they ever get a chance to go to a Nats game, I know the team's not exactly the draw right now, but it's very fun. Um,
There you go, Phil's Nats. I mean, we call it Citizens Bank Park South. So
yeah,
you know, I know a lot of Phillies fans travel for that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely. I don't know. Maybe before Philly Sports Network tailgate party down in DC. Stay tuned for stay tuned for
yeah.
more.
Let's ask Liam if we can expense that one.
Yeah, there you go. All right, yeah. I mean, that's all I had to kind of kick this thing off. Really, I mean, like we had said, off season been a little quiet, so it's kind of, without either repeating yourself or talking about things in the past, it's kind of hard to, use everything in the first episode. But we got some good stuff coming for you, I think. I'm not sure who's gonna be live next week just quite yet, but there will be a stream next Thursday night. Time to be determined, I'm sure. And next week is the Hall of Fame ballots will be released. There's a chance that former Philly Billy Wagner makes it. We'll kind of see where Chase Utley lands on his first year on the ballot. J Roll where he's at. Bobby Abreu's on the ballot. So bunch of former Phils are out there, so we could always talk about the Hall of Fame next week. Maybe by then the Phillies will have signed somebody. But Tom, is there anything else you wanted to head on before we headed out?
No, man, I'm good. We did 40 plus minutes for the first show. I mean, been a pleasure. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on. Always love talking Phils, and I'm excited to keep doing this and just roll into the season because this is it, man. This is in terms of expectations. The last couple years have been a nice surprise. This is the season where they really need to piece it all together and bring us home some rings.
I like the sound of that. So yeah, this has been the debut episode of Alley Talk, a Philly Sports Network Phillies podcast. We are just 26 days away from pitchers and catchers reporting the spring training, and we will have all Phillies coverage for you here in 2024. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.